I gave my wife exactly what she asked for, and that was the last mistake she ever made in our marriage. A week ago, Emily stood in our kitchen, sunlight cutting across the marble counter, her fingers wrapped around a coffee mug she hadn't touched, and said, "I think I need a week away, just me." Her voice was calm, almost rehearsed, like she'd said those words in her head a dozen times before letting them land between us. I didn't ask where she was going. I didn't ask who she'd be with. I just nodded, leaned back against the counter, and said, "Take all the time you need." She blinked, like she expected resistance, maybe even a fight, but I gave her nothing. No anger, no questions, no hesitation. Just permission. That was the moment something shifted, quiet and permanent, like a lock clicking into place. 8 years of marriage doesn't disappear in a single sentence. It fades slowly in the spaces people stop paying attention to. The late-night texts that never get explained. The phone turned face down on the table. The way someone starts smiling at their screen more than they smile at you. I'd seen it all. I just hadn't said anything. Not because I didn't notice, but because I was waiting. People think betrayal hits like a lightning strike, loud and sudden. It doesn't. It builds, like pressure behind a closed door, until one day you realize the door was never locked. Emily used to tell me everything. Or at least I thought she did. Somewhere along the way, that changed. Conversations got shorter. Eye contact got thinner. And the woman who once filled every room she walked into started feeling like a guest in her own house. I remember the exact moment I stopped believing her words. It wasn't dramatic. No shouting, no confrontation. Just a name that appeared on her phone one night when she thought I wasn't looking. Ryan. No last name. No explanation. Just a notification that disappeared as quickly as it came. I didn't bring it up. I didn't need to. Truth has a way of repeating itself when you stay quiet long enough. So when she asked for that week, I already knew it wasn't about space. It was about distance. Not from life, not from stress, but from me. And the thing about distance is, once someone chooses it, you don't chase them. You let them go far enough that coming back isn't simple anymore. That morning, as she packed her suitcase upstairs, I stood in the living room, listening to the soft rhythm of drawers opening and closing, hangers sliding across the closet rod, the quiet sounds of someone preparing to leave without saying it out loud. I didn't follow her. I didn't offer to drive her to the airport. When she finally came downstairs, suitcase rolling behind her, she paused by the door, like she was waiting for something. Maybe guilt. Maybe doubt. Maybe me. I just looked at her and said, "Have a good trip." She nodded, forced a small smile, and walked out. The door closed with a soft click. Not loud. Not dramatic. Just final. And in that silence, standing alone in a house that suddenly felt too big, I realized something most people learn too late. She thought she was leaving for a week. What she didn't understand was that I had already decided she wasn't coming back. The house stayed quiet long after her car disappeared down the street. The kind of quiet that does not feel peaceful, just empty, like something important had been removed and the space had not figured out how to adjust yet. I stood there for a while, not moving, not thinking, just listening to the absence she left behind, and then I did something that would have looked strange to anyone watching from the outside. I went about my day exactly as planned. Coffee at 7, emails by 8, a conference call at 9:15, the same routine I had followed for years. Except this time there was no distraction, no background noise of a marriage slowly cracking under pressure, just clarity. People assume a man in my position would feel anger first, maybe sadness, maybe confusion, but what I felt was something colder and far more useful, certainty. Because the truth is, her leaving did not create the problem, it confirmed it. I had been living with the evidence for months. Small details stacking up in ways that were easy to ignore if you wanted to believe in the version of your life you had built, but impossible to miss if you were paying attention. The late gym sessions that lasted a little too long, the sudden interest in appearances that did not include me, the way she would smile at her phone and then lock it the second I walked into the room. None of it was proof on its own, but together, It painted a picture that did not need explanation. And then there was Ryan. The name that showed up once, then again, each time more familiar, like it was trying to become part of our life without permission. I never asked her about him, not because I was afraid of the answer, but because I already had it. People reveal everything you need to know when they think you are not looking. That morning, after she left, I opened my laptop and pulled up the folder I had created weeks earlier. A simple name, nothing that would stand out, just a collection of details most people would call insignificant, but I knew better. Hotel confirmations, email headers, timestamps, small pieces that did not mean much alone but fit together too cleanly to ignore. I did not rush through it. I did not react. I just reviewed it like I would any other problem in my life, methodical, controlled, removing emotion from the equation. Because once you take emotion out, decisions become simple. Around noon, I made 2 calls. The first was to my attorney, a man who had handled business matters for me for years, someone who understood the value of preparation over reaction. I did not explain everything. I did not need to. I just told him I was ready to move forward and that I wanted everything structured cleanly, quietly, and permanently. The second call was to my bank. Joint accounts are built on trust, and trust, once broken, has no business remaining in financial form. I made adjustments, not aggressive, not obvious, just enough to ensure that control shifted where it needed to be without raising alarms too early. By the time the sun started to drop, casting long shadows across the living room floor, the house no longer felt empty, it felt organized, like a space that had been cleared out on purpose. I walked upstairs, opened the closet, and saw the gap where her clothes used to be, a clean line where something had been removed, and for the first time, it did not feel like a loss, it felt like alignment. She thought she had stepped away from a life that would be waiting for her when she returned, unchanged, intact, exactly the way she left it. What she did not understand was that while she was gone, I was not standing still. I was closing doors she had already walked through, one decision at a time, until the only thing left for her to come back to was the truth she had been avoiding all along. By the second day, the rhythm of the house had completely reset, not in a dramatic way, not like something had been torn apart, but more like a system that had been quietly recalibrated after running inefficiently for too long. I woke up before sunrise the same way I always did, but there was no hesitation in my movements anymore, no second guessing, no background noise of trying to maintain something that had already slipped beyond repair. I made breakfast, simple, routine, eggs and coffee, and sat at the kitchen island where she had stood just 48 hours earlier asking for space, and I realized how different that moment looked now with clarity instead of assumption. People do not ask for distance when they are trying to fix something, they ask for distance when they have already stepped outside of it. That understanding changes everything. Around mid-morning, my phone buzzed with a message from her, short and casual, the kind of message designed to sound normal, like nothing had shifted, just a quick update about arriving safely and how nice the place was, followed by a picture of a view that could have been anywhere, a balcony, a horizon, something meant to reassure without actually saying anything real. I looked at it for a moment, then set the phone down without replying. Not out of anger, not out of spite, but because the conversation she thought we were still having had already ended. Silence, when used correctly, says more than any response ever could. Instead, I opened my laptop and continued where I had left off, reviewing accounts, checking documentation, making sure every piece of the structure I was building held exactly the way it needed to. There is a difference between reacting to a situation and positioning yourself within it, and I had no interest in reacting anymore. By early afternoon, I drove across town to meet my attorney in person, a low-profile office tucked between a financial firm and a coffee shop, the kind of place where serious decisions are made without drawing attention. He did not ask unnecessary questions, he did not offer emotional commentary, he simply reviewed what I had prepared and nodded in a way that told me everything I needed to know, that this was not complicated, just precise. We discussed timelines, documentation, how to ensure that when everything moved forward, it would do so cleanly, without room for confusion or reversal. When I left his office, There was a sense of finality that settled in, not heavy, not overwhelming, just firm, like a door that had been closed and locked without hesitation. Later that evening, I returned home and walked through each room slowly, not out of nostalgia, but to observe, to see the space for what it actually was instead of what I had convinced myself it used to be. The living room felt larger, the bedroom quieter, the closet more honest in its emptiness. There were no distractions left, no illusions to maintain. Around 8 o'clock, another message came through, this time a little more personal, asking how I was doing, telling me she missed me, small words meant to keep a connection alive without addressing the reality underneath it. I read it once, then set the phone face down again. Missing someone and respecting them are not the same thing, and I had learned the difference the hard way. That night, as I turned off the lights and headed upstairs, I paused for a moment at the base of the staircase, looking at the house not as something shared, but as something defined, something that no longer depended on two people pretending everything was fine. She believed she had created distance by leaving for a week, but distance had already been there long before she packed that suitcase. The only difference now was that I had stopped pretending it could be closed, and once you accept that, once you stop negotiating with something that is already broken, every decision becomes easier, cleaner, and far more permanent than the person on the other side ever expects. By the third day, the pattern became predictable, not in a comforting way, but in a way that confirmed everything I had already concluded. Her messages shifted tone, subtle at first, then more noticeable, like someone adjusting their approach when the response they expected does not come. The updates about her trip became more frequent, more detailed, descriptions of restaurants, sunsets, small stories that felt rehearsed, like she was trying to paint a picture I was supposed to believe in. But the more she talked, the more the gaps showed. People who are telling the truth do not need to fill silence with extra detail. I read each message carefully, not for what she said, but for what she avoided. There was no mention of who she was with, no casual reference to a friend, no names, just a carefully constructed narrative that left out the only detail that mattered. That kind of omission is not accidental. It is deliberate. That afternoon, I sat in my home office, the blinds half closed, light cutting across the desk in sharp lines, and opened the same folder I had been building for weeks. I traced the timeline again, not because I needed to, but because precision matters when you are about to close something permanently. Dates lined up too cleanly, overlaps that should not exist if the story she was telling had been real. Hotel confirmations that matched the exact days she claimed were spontaneous getaways. Payment records that did not belong to a single person traveling alone. It was not a mystery anymore. It was a pattern. And patterns do not lie. Around 4 in the afternoon, I received another message, this one different, a little more personal, a little more direct. She said she wished I was there, that she missed how things used to be, that maybe this time apart would help us reconnect. I read it twice, not because it moved me, but because it showed me exactly where she thought she still had control. She believed this was a temporary distance, something we would close once she came back, like pressing pause on a conversation and resuming it later. What she did not understand was that I had already ended that conversation days ago. That evening, I made another quiet adjustment, one that would not be visible immediately but would matter when everything surfaced. I reviewed shared subscriptions, access points, digital connections that tied our lives together in ways most people forget about. It is not just accounts and money that bind two people, it is systems, permissions, small invisible threads that keep things functioning as one. I began to separate them, one by one, not aggressively, not in a way that would trigger alerts, just enough to ensure that when the time came, there would be no confusion about what remained connected and what did not. Later that night, I stepped outside onto the back patio, the air cool, quiet, the kind of stillness that usually invites reflection. But I was not reflecting anymore. Reflection belongs to people who are still deciding. I had already decided. I stood there for a while, looking out at the yard we had once talked about redesigning, plans we had made that never moved forward, and I realized how much of our life had been built on intentions instead of reality. Around 9:30, her name lit up my phone again, this time a call instead of a message. I let it ring. Not because I wanted to punish her, not because I was trying to make a statement, but because there was nothing left to say that would change the direction this was going. When the call ended, a text followed almost immediately, asking if everything was okay, if I was upset, if I could just respond. I placed the phone face down on the table and turned off the lights. Concern, when it comes too late, is not concern. It is awareness catching up to consequences. And as I walked upstairs, the house completely silent again, I knew something she had not realized yet. The distance she thought she was controlling was no longer hers to manage. It belonged to me now, and I was making sure it stayed that way. By the fourth day, the silence had done what arguments never could, it shifted the balance completely. Her messages no longer carried that casual confidence, they came quicker now, closer together, each one trying a different tone, light, then warm, then concerned, like she was testing which version of herself would get a response. I read them all, not emotionally, but analytically, the same way I would review any set of data that no longer aligned with reality. The pattern was clear. When someone loses control of a situation they thought they understood, they start reaching for anything that might restore it. That morning, I woke up earlier than usual, the house still dark, and sat at the kitchen island with a fresh cup of coffee, the same spot where she had stood when she asked for that week away. It felt different now, not heavy, not painful, just precise, like a point on a timeline that marked where everything changed direction. I opened my laptop and reviewed the final set of documents my attorney had sent over the night before. Everything was in place, structured cleanly, nothing aggressive, nothing messy, just a clear separation of what was mine and what no longer belonged in my life. It is a strange thing, ending something without confrontation. There is no raised voice, no dramatic moment, just decisions made quietly, one after another, until there is nothing left to negotiate. Around mid-morning, her name lit up my phone again, another call. This time it rang longer, persistent, like she was waiting for the version of me that used to pick up without hesitation. I let it go to voicemail. A minute later, a message followed, longer than the others, more direct. She asked if something was wrong, if I was upset, if we needed to talk, the kind of questions that come when someone finally realizes they are no longer in control of the conversation. I did not respond. Not because I wanted to ignore her, but because there was no benefit in answering questions that had already been resolved on my side. Instead, I focused on what still needed to be completed. By early afternoon, I drove to the bank in person, a quiet branch just a few miles from the house, the kind of place where everything moves calmly and nothing draws attention. I met with a representative I had worked with before, explained that I wanted to update access and permissions on several accounts, nothing unusual, just routine adjustments, and watched as the changes were processed one by one. There is a certain finality in watching systems update in real time, numbers shifting, access points closing, small confirmations appearing on a screen that mark the end of something shared. When I walked out, the air felt sharper, clearer, like everything unnecessary had been stripped away. Later that evening, I returned home and sat in the living room, the lights dim, the television off, just the quiet hum of the house settling into itself. My phone buzzed again, another message, shorter this time, almost hesitant. She said she felt like I was pulling away, asked if I still loved her, asked if everything was going to be okay. I read it once, then set the phone down on the table and leaned back in my chair. Love does not disappear in a single moment, but it does change when respect is gone, and once that shift happens, there is no version of the past that can be restored. I stood up, turned off the lights, and walked upstairs, each step steady, deliberate, the same way every decision had been over the past few days. She thought this week was a pause, a temporary distance that would bring us back together when it was over. What she did not understand was that while she was waiting to return, I had already finished what needed to be done. There was nothing left to go back to, and the closer she got to coming home, the more that truth was going to meet her at the door. By the fifth day, the distance had started to echo back at her, and I could see it in the way her messages changed again, no longer controlled, no longer measured, but uncertain, like someone stepping into a room they thought they owned and realizing the furniture had been rearranged while they were gone. That morning, her call came earlier than usual, just after 7, persistent, 3 times in a row, followed by a message that did not try to sound casual anymore. She asked if something had happened, if I was okay, if I was upset with her, the words stacked on top of each other without the usual space she used to keep things light. I let the phone sit on the counter while the coffee brewed, the sound of it filling the silence she used to occupy, and for a moment I just watched the screen light up and fade, like a signal losing strength. I was not ignoring her. I was letting reality reach her at its own pace. Around mid-morning, I received an email notification, not from her, but from the airline she had used, a confirmation update tied to a shared account that had not yet been fully separated. I opened it, not out of curiosity, but out of habit, and saw the itinerary details that matched exactly with the timeline I had already mapped out. The return date was set for the end of the week, just as she had said, but what stood out was not the date, it was the booking pattern, the paired reservations, the structure that confirmed what I had known from the beginning. She had not been alone. She had just assumed I would never look closely enough to see it. That assumption was the only mistake that mattered. I closed the email and made one final adjustment to the account, removing my access entirely. No alerts, no notifications, just a clean break. By early afternoon, I met with my attorney again, this time to review the finalized documents in person. Everything was prepared, organized in a simple folder that sat on the desk between us, not dramatic, not overwhelming, just precise. He walked me through the final steps, the timing, how everything would be delivered, how there would be no confusion about what was happening when she returned. I listened, nodded, and signed where I needed to, each signature a confirmation of a decision that had already been made long before the pen touched the paper. When I stood up to leave, he asked one question, not emotional, not personal, just direct, whether I was certain. I paused for a moment, not because I needed to think, but because I wanted to answer clearly. I told him I had been certain for days. The difference now was that everything matched that certainty. That evening, I stopped by the house on my way back, even though I had already begun shifting some of my routine elsewhere, and walked through it one more time. The rooms were quiet, unchanged on the surface, but completely different underneath. I placed the folder on the kitchen island, the same spot where everything had started, and left it there, not hidden, not staged, just present, waiting. Around 9 o'clock, her message came through again, shorter this time, stripped of any attempt to control the tone. She said she felt like something was wrong, that I was not acting like myself, that she wanted to talk when she got back. I read it slowly, then set the phone down and looked around the room. She was right about one thing. I was not acting like myself. I was acting like someone who had finally stopped pretending. And by the time she walked back through that door, the version of me she expected to find would not be there anymore. By the 6th day, everything was already in motion, not in a way she could see yet, but in a way she was about to feel the moment she stepped back into a life that no longer existed the way she remembered it. That morning, her messages stopped trying to sound casual altogether. There was no more talk about the view, no more pictures, no more attempts to pretend this was just a break. Instead, the words came faster, shorter, direct questions without decoration. She asked why I was not responding, asked if I was angry, asked if something had happened at home. I read each message slowly, not to interpret emotion, but to confirm what I already understood. The shift had reached her. Not fully, not clearly, but enough for her to feel that something was no longer under her control. Around noon, a final notification came through, a flight reminder confirming her return the next day. I looked at it for a moment, then closed it without hesitation. Timing matters when you are closing something permanently, and everything had aligned exactly the way it needed to. That afternoon, I returned to the house one last time before she came back. The air inside felt still, untouched, like a place waiting for a version of reality that was not going to arrive. I walked through each room again, not searching for memories, not revisiting the past, just confirming that everything was exactly where it needed to be. The living room was clean, minimal, nothing out of place. The bedroom was stripped of anything that belonged to her, no lingering details, no half measures. The closet stood open, a clear line dividing what remained from what had been removed. There is a clarity in absence that presence often hides. In the kitchen, the folder still sat on the island, unchanged, positioned exactly where she would see it the moment she walked in. Not hidden, not dramatic, just there, waiting. I adjusted it slightly, aligning it with the edge of the counter, a small detail, but precision matters when you are making a point without saying a word. Around 3 in the afternoon, I made one final call to my attorney, confirming that everything was set for the next day, that the documents would be active the moment she received them, that there would be no delay, no opportunity for confusion. He confirmed, calm and direct, the same tone he had carried throughout the entire process. When the call ended, there was nothing left to prepare. That was the moment most people would hesitate, second-guess, replay conversations in their head, wonder if there was still a version of the situation that could be salvaged. I did none of that. Because the truth is, once you see something clearly, you cannot go back to pretending you do not. That evening, her final message came through before her flight, longer than the others, more emotional, asking if we could talk when she landed, saying she felt like something was wrong between us, that she did not understand the distance, that she wanted to fix whatever was happening. I read it once, then set the phone down on the table and turned off the lights. Fixing something requires both people to still be in it. She had already stepped out. I just made sure the door closed behind her. As the house went quiet again, darker now, still, settled, I stood there for a moment and let the silence sit. Not heavy, not uncertain, just complete. By the time she walked through that front door the next day, she was expecting a conversation. What she was going to find instead was a conclusion. She arrived just after noon the next day, the sound of her car pulling into the driveway cutting through the quiet like something out of place, unfamiliar now, even though it had once been part of the rhythm of the house. I was not there when she walked in. That part mattered. Some moments are not meant to be shared, especially when the truth needs space to land without interruption. The front door opened, then closed, a soft click that echoed slightly in the stillness, and for a few seconds, there was nothing. No movement, no voice, just the silence she had stepped back into, expecting it to feel the same. Then came the first shift, subtle, almost unnoticeable at first, the pause. The kind of pause that happens when something does not feel right, when the air itself carries a difference you cannot immediately explain. Her suitcase wheels rolled across the floor, slower than they should have, hesitation in the sound, like she was already sensing that something had changed. The house was clean, almost too clean, not staged, not empty, just precise. The absence of her things was not chaotic, it was intentional. That is what unsettles people the most, not loss, but order. A few seconds later, her footsteps moved further in, crossing into the kitchen, and that is where it would have become clear. The folder sat exactly where I had left it, centered on the island, the only object in a space that used to hold more. There is a moment when realization begins, not fully formed, not complete, just a crack in the version of reality someone has been holding on to. That was the moment she stepped into. I imagine she stood there for a second, maybe two, looking at it, not touching it yet, her mind trying to catch up, trying to place what she was seeing into a context that made sense. But there was no context left that would soften it. The phone call came shortly after. I let it ring once, twice, then answered. I did not say her name. I did not ask if she was home. I just waited. Her voice came through, uncertain, controlled, but not steady. She asked what was going on, why the house looked different, why there was a folder sitting in the kitchen like something waiting for her. I listened to the questions without interrupting, the same way I had listened to everything else over the past week, and when she stopped, I answered simply. I told her to open it. There was a pause on the line, longer this time, heavier. Then the sound of paper moving, the faint shift of pages being turned, the quiet realization building in real time. People expect confrontation in moments like this, raised voices, explanations, something emotional to hold on to. But there was none of that. Just silence, followed by a single question, softer now, stripped of everything she had been holding on to before. She asked if I was serious. I did not raise my voice. I did not add anything extra. I just said yes. That word landed heavier than anything else I could have said. There was another pause, longer than before, and in that space, everything she had assumed about this week, about coming back, about picking up where things left off, collapsed without noise. She tried to speak again, to ask something else, to find a way back into a conversation that no longer existed, but there was nothing left to negotiate. I told her everything she needed to know was in the folder, that the process had already started, that there was no confusion about what came next. My voice stayed steady, not cold, not emotional, just clear. When the call ended, I did not move right away. I stood there for a moment, phone still in my hand, the quiet returning in a way that felt different now, not empty, not uncertain, just complete. She had come back expecting to restart something. What she found instead was that it had already been finished. The house did not change after that call, but the meaning of it did. I did not go back that day, not because I was avoiding anything, but because there was nothing left in that space that required my presence. Some endings are not meant to be witnessed in person. They are meant to be understood in silence. The next morning, I woke up in a place that was not tied to shared routines, not tied to habits built around someone else's choices, and for the first time in a long time, the air felt different, lighter, not because something had been added, but because something unnecessary had been removed. My phone stayed quiet for a few hours, then it started again. Messages, longer this time, less controlled, trying to fill the gap that had formed overnight. She asked questions I had already answered, tried to revisit moments that no longer existed, referenced memories like they could still hold weight in a situation that had already moved past them. I read a few of them, not all, and then I stopped. There is a point where listening no longer serves a purpose, where it becomes repetition instead of communication. Around noon, I received confirmation from my attorney that everything had been filed and processed exactly as planned. Clean, direct, no delays. That message did not feel like a victory. It felt like completion. There is a difference. Winning implies there was something to compete over. This was never about that. This was about clarity, about aligning reality with truth instead of continuing to operate inside something that had already broken beneath the surface. Later that afternoon, I drove past the house, not stopping, just passing by, the same way you pass a place that used to matter but no longer defines where you are going. From the outside, it looked the same, unchanged, quiet, like any other house on the street. That is the thing about these moments, they do not leave visible marks. The structure remains. The difference is in what no longer exists inside it. I kept driving, not looking back, not out of discipline, but because there was nothing behind me that needed revisiting. That evening, one final message came through, shorter than the others, stripped of everything that had come before it. No questions, no explanations, just a simple statement that she did not expect things to end this way. I read it once, then set the phone down and let the silence return. Expectations are built on assumptions, and assumptions collapse when reality does not follow the script someone imagined. That is what this had been from the beginning. She believed she could step away, create distance, explore something outside of what we had built, and then return when it suited her, as if time would pause and wait for her to come back. But time does not pause. It moves, and so do people who understand what they are seeing. I did not raise my voice. I did not argue. I did not try to prove anything. I simply made a decision and followed it through to the end. That is what changed everything. Not anger, not confrontation, just clarity applied consistently. As the night settled in and the world outside quieted, I sat there for a moment, not thinking about what had happened, not replaying the past, just recognizing the stillness for what it was. Not emptiness, not loss, but space. Space to move forward without carrying something that no longer belonged. She asked for time to be free, just a week, something temporary, something she thought she could control. I gave her exactly what she asked for, just not in the way she expected. Because some things, once they are seen clearly, do not get paused, they get finished, completely, permanently, without noise.